This is Vote Her In, a collaboration between Two Broads Talking Politics and author Rebecca Sive. On today's episode, our guest is Dr. Barbara Bollier. Hi, everyone. This is Kelly, and you're listening to Vote Her In, which is a collaboration between Two Broads Talking Politics and author Rebecca Sive, where we were originally looking at the movement to elect our first woman president, but we're expanding a bit beyond that. So I'm going to turn it over to Rebecca now to introduce our guest. Hi, Rebecca.
Hi, Kelly, and glad to be here. And yes, this is another edition of Vote Her In. And as we have moved forward, and of course, it looks like we'll have a woman vice presidential candidate, but not a woman presidential candidate, we are going beyond that and really behind it, because the bigger issue there is, of course, women attaining executive, political, and governmental power. So we're right in the stream here today on that topic with Dr. Barbara Bollier, who is running for the U.S. Senate in Kansas. We couldn't be more thrilled to be able to chat with her today about what she's doing, why she's doing it, and her inspirational cause, quite frankly, for those of us who've been watching Kansas here for a while. So welcome, Dr. Bollier. And for those of you who may not know enough about her, and you'll be able to learn more when you look at the podcast website, she is a member of the Kansas State Legislature and has been a doctor for many years, and so comes to us with some very particular kinds of expertise. So welcome. We're glad to have you.
Thank you so much. I'm very honored to be with you today and excited.
Well, we need to stay excited and thinking hard and being busy, I guess. And in that context, we wanted to begin with really, I think, something that interests us and certainly interests our listeners as well, and that is if you can talk with us about, for many years you were a Republican, you switched political parties, and share with us your thinking about why you're now a Democrat. What were the messages, the issues, the values that made you decide that that's what you wanted to do and how you wanted to run for office?
Thank you for that question. It's a great one. And not surprisingly, a lot of people are curious about it. So I grew up here in Kansas, where we have moderate Republicans as well as conservative Republicans and then Democrats. And having grown up myself as a moderate Republican with women like Nancy Kassebaum being my role model, I always thought that those people represented the values that I had, which things like affordable and funding our public education system and working to make sure that all people have health care and in Kansas, Medicaid available for all, an expansion of Medicaid, things like liberty and justice for all and a right for women to have her own autonomy in her medical decisions, and on down the list. And ultimately, with Sam Brownback as our governor, he put in place this horrific tax experiment that decimated state government. And ultimately, it became clear to me that the values that I just talked about, the values that most of my district had, were not being represented appropriately on the Republican side. So I saw our now governor, Laura Kelly, was running for governor against my most probable opponent in this particular race, Chris Kobach, and she was clearly the better candidate. So I went across party lines, endorsed her, and ultimately realized leaving the party was what needed to happen so that I and my constituents, their values could be represented appropriately and effectively. So nothing changed with me. My values stayed the same. Mm-hmm. My people, their values stayed the same, but the party had left us. And right. It's really nice to be a very proud, pragmatic Democrat now and be with people who are willing and want to listen to one another to make good public policy.
Sounds good to me.
As you mentioned, Kansas just elected Laura Kelly as governor a couple of years ago, a terrific woman in executive power. There have been a lot of great women candidates in Kansas over the past few years. We've had, I think, 3 different women named Laura running for office in Kansas who've been on the Two Broads Talking Politics podcast, including Laura Kelly. So talk to us some about women voters in Kansas, what they're concerned about, what you're hearing from them. You know, what is it about the women of Kansas, as you mentioned, very pragmatic like you, that is really going to drive some of what's going on in this race?
Another excellent question. And I'll tell you, women in Kansas, they are strong, capable women. You know, you go back to the roots of prairie, of taming the prairie. And that's women here care deeply about their families, but they also know how to lead their families. And they're willing to go do the hard work that it takes to make life good. So what I'm finding from women or anybody across the state is that we're all concerned about the same things, whether we be from rural areas or urban areas or suburban. What I'm hearing from people is their number one issue is health care. And that's way before we even had a pandemic on our hands, which is pointing out some of the weaknesses of our healthcare system. But people know healthcare is too complicated and it's too expensive. And we need a government that's going to reform our system and help us move to a place where we can be focusing on being well. And that's women want those basic things that make their family happy. They're the ones that are doing the things like calling the insurance company when they don't pay. They're the ones that end up running to the drugstore or whatever and making sure their children get to the doctor, on and on and on. And so that is a huge issue, but it's really about anything that's very typical for all of us. We want our families to be safe and healthy. Kansans want a place where the economics are viable for them to earn a good living and have a sustainable life wage and just be able to live, coexisting with liberty and justice for all. I think that's exactly, be they women or even men. That's what Kansans are looking for. We're about neighbor helping neighbor here.
You know, when you talk about liberty and justice for all, of course, at the time that was written, women had virtually no rights in the public arena, not the right to vote and certainly not the opportunity to run. And one of the things, of course, that's changed in the last few years is, as we were discussing, is more women running for executive office. And it struck me when I was thinking about our chatting with you that as a doctor, you had a form of executive power, so to speak, albeit in a different setting. And I wonder if you could talk with us and our listeners a bit about why you see that kind of political office, governmental responsibility as important. And of course, in the Senate, there is a significant opportunity for senators to chair committees, which is its own form of executive power. And so I sort of am curious as to how you think about that aspect of your coming role and that aspect of women's candidacies these days.
Well, I love that you brought up about the comparison of being a physician and being a public servant. To me, they're both about serving. And having watched all the time, what I see women doing so well in their servant role in public office, as physicians, as whatever, is that they're willing to come together. They collaborate well. And I know as a physician, what I learned was first to listen and then do something which might not surprise you, is follow data and follow science, and then collaborate with my colleagues, be they nurses or respiratory therapists or other physicians, and come up with a plan that is ready to be executed to do the best for the patient, which translates directly into, as a public servant, translates into do what's best for the people and your constituents. So that power, again, really isn't about being powerful. It's being able to listen and execute well. And I think women have done that over time and continue. And that's why we look forward to women having more place in government. And, to follow in the words of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, when is it enough? When it's all, and then you start asking, well, so when do we need to get men back in? And I'm not saying we don't elect people based on their merits, but point being, we have been suppressed over the years, and it's time to get out. We are the ones that get turned to, and you look at statistically, we're good, very good at working together and bringing people to the table together to make good things happen.
And just a quick follow-up on that, I think, there's no doubt about that. We can all begin by looking at Speaker Pelosi and know the truth of what you've said. But there is something about that executive role, and I just wonder if I could just ask you again about that. The buck stops here, and that's what I was thinking about. In addition to the, as you put it, the service role of being a doctor, there you are in the doctor's office. You're going to say to your patient with loving care, but you're the one. Here's what I think you should do.
Well, and I was an anesthesiologist in my medical practice, and you serve in that role as captain of the ship. Yes, you're alongside. Yes, the surgeon is also, but you've got to have a team. And I learned great things at being able to delegate and relegate what needs to be happening right now, immediately for the patient, particularly when, in surgery, things come up and things happen. You like for it to be routine but what you're prepared for is when it's not, and when crises happen. And I, as a woman, was very good in my role in the operating room and directing things and making sure what happened was in the best interest for patients, including at times having to stand up and talk down the surgeon and say, no, this is not what needs to be happening now. I'm in charge making sure this patient is going to live through this surgery, and I need you to stop so we can give blood, or I need, whatever it may be. But that's what I look to our women leaders right now, and the ones that are doing great. They're willing to stand up to people who act as if they know best and want to do the whole mansplaining or whatever else. You have to be able to say, in spite of, quote, political consequences, it matters most that you do what's best for the people, and you're willing to stand up and take that stand. And I look forward to being able to translate that all the way up to the federal level.
So I wanted to ask some about electoral strategy. So Kansas seems like the hardest state on the whole U.S. Senate map to figure out where it's going to go. This is a seat that 6 years ago, the last time this particular seat was up, was won fairly easily by the Republican. In 2016, the Senate race was even more lopsided, but this is an open seat this time. 2 years ago, Kansas elected a Democratic governor. It seems very difficult to sort of predict where things are going in the state. So talk to us some about your strategy in running, what you see as happening on the ground. What is turnout going to look like in a weird electoral season like this? Any thoughts you have about what this race really looks like?
Well, I'm going to go back. First of all, Kansas, people always think it's reliably red. But when you look back to the history of the state, we have elected as many Republican governors as Democratic governors. And over time, because we've had this moderate group of Republicans, you can look to say that we've had more moderates. Nancy Kassebaum would be a great example. I would tell you she wouldn't fit into the Republican Party right now. But we have had that, and we continue to look for that as a strategy, as saying this is about the people and people who want to come together and work hard across party lines. So to say that it's reliably red, actually 6 years ago when Pat Roberts ran last before he said he was retiring, he was under tremendous pressure from an unaffiliated candidate. And you could look at the numbers and say, well, he won handily, but 3 weeks before that election actually completed, he was in trouble. And so I know that Kansans, they've elected Laura Kelly, they elected Sharice Davids, they have formerly elected Kathleen Sebelius. They are looking again for people who are problem solvers and want to work on issues, not just necessarily about being in a particular party. So we're doing what all people do when they're running an election. We're getting out, albeit not physically now, but certainly through the internet and by talking to people on the phone, et cetera. We're getting out a message and connecting and listening to the people and for what they want. So I see we're going to have a great turnout because people are excited. This race hasn't really been in significant play since 1932 for a Democrat. The party's ready, the people are ready, and we're going to look forward to having everyone voting and helping change history here.
And speaking of changing history and the fact that history is fortunately changing in many states, we were wondering and thinking about whether you've had the opportunity to chat with some of the women senators, certainly with Governor Sebelius, and kind of gather from them lessons that you want to implement in your own campaign, lessons you want to share as you speak to people and contact them in the campaign. Is there a sort of set of feelings or ideas or notions that you have related to the fact that you've talked to other women who are in the office that you're running for or offices akin to it?
What I love about that is it emphasizes the fact that women want to work together, and they are eager to do that, rather than in a vacuum or as only my way or the highway. And so I would say over not just from this election, but over my whole life, I've watched how women leaders and women in politics bring to the forefront that ability to work together and be willing to compromise. That's another word that seems to be missing from our lexicon these days politically. And that's something I'm certainly hearing from other women that are either in office or running for office. I happened to be today on another call with a group of women physicians who are running around the country. And it was fascinating to hear. We each could have answered either anybody else's questions because we've been trained in the same mantra of doing our best for the people and bringing those kinds of ideas as women forward. That's what women have to offer. And I would say truly number one is willingness to listen and to learn. Women learn from our mistakes if we have them, but we're willing to admit it and go on and get back to it. So I love being a woman running right now. I look forward to the day when that isn't unique or special, but for now we'll take what it is and say that this is a great place for us to be and how we can help this country move forward.
So speaking of the country changing, everything is different right now for all of us. I, like many people, am a mom who's working full-time, balancing homeschooling my kids, all sorts of other things at the moment. What sort of advice do you have for us as a doctor, as a mom, about taking care of ourselves, taking care of our families right now in this sort of really bizarre moment we're in?
Well, it is certainly unprecedented. It's not in history in that we have had infectious disease, but for many years we've lived under a great luxury of not having something that we couldn't treat or that, having something so new that was so contagious. So be it as a doctor, a mom, a woman, a person just who's part of the community, I think the number one thing, of course, is to listen to those with science backgrounds and medical backgrounds to follow their directions and about how we proceed. Women are running things. I mean, we've always had to multitask. And so now instead of being off at work and our children in daycare. Now we're at home having to homeschool along with the teachers, still making all the meals for a lot of households. I'm going to give some credit to those who do those things, but we just have to balance more and more on our plate. And, my advice to women is, of course, to take care of yourself during these times. So much gets laid at our feet, and the expectations are so high. But knowing when to reach out and ask for help from others, that's something we have trouble with as well, but we can do. And knowing to take care of ourselves and rest, because if we're not healthy, our family is not going to be healthy either. And we're so needed in all these things that we do. So I am really proud. I love to watch the women leading in this pandemic and crisis, and know that it'll be exciting to see what woman finds the vaccine, and what woman finds the answer to some of our questions on how to get more PPE made, or whatever it may be. Women can lead the way in these things, and I'm just proud of all the other women, and empathetic with them too. This is stressful, and there's anxiety, but we can do this, and especially because we have each other and are willing to reach out to one another as women.
What a wonderful message to end this conversation. Thank you so much, Barbara. We want to make sure that our listeners know how to be in touch with you in your campaign. So we're going to say a very big thank you, but if you'd like to share your website address, that would be wonderful. And then people can keep learning and what you're doing and be supportive of it.
I deeply appreciate the time to spend with you all today, and know how proud I am to be a woman who can help lead. And I can't wait to help more women in the future continue in their leadership roles around this country. And our webpage is Bollier for Kansas, and it's BOLLIER, pronounced like a bowl of soup, and say yay, which is exciting. So be well and be safe. Thank you for having me on today. And I'm excited as a woman to help move our country forward at a very critical time.
Great.
Thank you so much.
The Vote Her In segment is a collaboration of Two Broads Talking Politics and author Rebecca Sive. Our theme song is called Are You Listening, off of the album Elephant-Shaped Trees by the band Immunuri, and we're using it with permission of the band. Our logo and other original artwork is by Matthew Weflin and was created for use by this podcast. You can contact us at twobroadstalkingpolitics@gmail.com or on Twitter or Facebook at Two Broads Talk. You can find all of our episodes at twobroadstalkingpolitics.com or anywhere podcasts are found.